Hello and welcome to Thank You Internet.
A sincere love letter to everything the internet has to offer.
My name is David Spencer.
And I'm Michael Hunter.
And welcome.
Welcome to our podcast. So that's about as official sounding as we've had so far, right?
Yeah, we're doing really good. Now let's see how it is coming back from the interview, because that's always where we stumble on.
Yeah.
For anybody who thinks, man, this sounds really weird right now, me and Michael are actually not in the same location. And no, it's not because I'm in Alaska. And we're both actually in LA. It was just too difficult to travel to each other because of the rain and.
Yeah. To be fair, like it was thunderstorming like crazy this morning.
Yeah. But hey, for anybody from LA, thank God we're finally getting rain.
For real though, we're in a drought and it's not fun.
I feel bad for every drop of water I drink, and even worse for every time I flush the toilet or something.
I just feel bad for my whole existence, for 60% of my existence, because it's all water, and it's water that could be helping people.
You should feel awful for 60% of your existence. But yeah, no, we took a week off last week because I was in Alaska. And, like, I was half considering, like, you know what, we should try to record. And then it got to, I was packing, and I was like, well, I can't fit my mics into my luggage. I guess I'm not recording. But also, I was on vacation and wanted to be lazy. But, laziness.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. Laziness. The cornerstone of the internet.
The cornerstone of the internet. As I think it was last episode that ended with you saying you wanted to hear some Psyduck dubstep. And,
yes, please.
And then you were like, I don't want to do it because I'm lazy. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I'm lazy too.
There we go. We're both lazy. And actually, it's speaking of Psyduck, I just love being able to get like a part of these different Twitter handles that are dedicated to Pokemon posts, and all the time they'll be like, what's the best Pokemon? Go. And I'm like, obviously it's Psyduck. It's obviously, because whoever tells you wrong is an idiot and wrong. And every time I've always gotten at least like 2 retweets. So
I just had my tweet that has gotten the most favorites and retweets that has ever been, and the tweet was, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but it was just posting that my mom was watching it and said in the middle of season 2, will the real S.H.I.E.L.D. please stand up? And it was like, wow, my mom just made a 90s rap joke about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Clearly, I get all the favorites and retweets.
Yep, Slim Shady would be proud.
That's the internet for you.
The internet.
But yeah, anyways, because we took a week off last week, we decided to skip our whole, because we've been doing every other episode was an interview, and then the other ones were just random discussions about bullshit. So we decided to skip the bullshit this week and just give you an interview, because it's technically been 2 weeks since we gave you an interview. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas in July.
Happy 4th of July, miss.
Actually, this episode will be released. Oh, it won't be released on Christmas in July, but it'll be pretty close. It's like a couple days
that's
before
right.
that.
Yeah, should be like, I don't know, a few days. Prior.
And we're trying to actually lock into Wednesdays as being the release date. So expect these podcasts on Wednesdays now. And now that I've said that, now I really got to hold myself to it, because I just told an audience. Wednesdays.
You just dropped like a schedule now.
I gotta, you know what? I need
it's official.
A commitment. I need something to keep myself from not being lazy, because last week's took a lot longer than I anticipated. There was some audio issues. Hopefully none of it showed up in the final product, but it took more work than I want to do.
Yeah.
But now I gotta convince myself. Now I got to convince myself I actually have to stay on a schedule.
A schedule. And we got, honestly, I feel like it's a good thing to stay on a schedule, because if we're trying to, make ourselves look professional, that's what we got to do.
Yeah, people want consistency, and I'm going to give it to them. So yeah, today we're going to be interviewing Andrew Linde. He is a podcaster, a podcast producer. He runs the Benview Network, which is a whole network of all kinds of different shows, and he hosts a couple of podcasts himself. But before we get into that, I just want to, do a quick, you know what? I just want to talk about podcasts a little bit, just spend a couple minutes priming the air, because not every single one of our listeners, will necessarily be familiar with podcasts. A lot of you guys, this could be the first podcast you've ever downloaded. Maybe you were a fan of a YouTuber we've interviewed or will interview if you're listening in the future, and you were like, well, I got to check out this whole podcasty thing now, and you may be thinking to yourself, what's the deal with podcasts? Do you ever think about that, Michael? You're like, what's the deal with podcasts? Why are all these
deal with podcasts? Are they pods or are they casts?
But for me, this is the core of my internet fandom. When I first discovered podcasts, it was like discovering a part of myself where I'm like, oh my God, I never knew this was a thing, and I love it so much. And it's the simplest kind of medium, because it's just guys talking. I'm pretty sure all of the first podcasts were just like, hey, I love talking about this thing. I want just, to hear everybody hear me talk about this thing. And it's totally free form, and you can do so many crazy cool things with it. And I just want to, for those of you who are new to the podcast world, and maybe this will be a chance for you to expand your repertoire, to look into more different types of shows, because this is a very, specific type of show where we're interviewing different people, we're discussing these different subjects, but podcasts range from the super, super general to the super, super specific. If there's a TV show you like, you can do a search for it. There's probably half a dozen podcasts about that show. One of my favorites, Level 7 Access, that talks about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm going to I've talked to those guys a couple of times. I'm going to try to get them on the show in the future. But you can, there's podcasts that are just, dudes talking about bullshit, like Smodcast, which is literally just Kevin Smith and Scott Mosier being like, I just want to talk about nothing, and here's a podcast, and people listen to it, and he gets a freaking movie made. Have you ever seen the movie Tusk, Michael?
Yeah, I did.
But
it was good. It was good. I'm not saying it was bizarre.
It was really bizarre. But you know the story of how that movie came about, right?
It wasn't it Kevin Smith said something about something kind of about that idea on their podcast, and then someone was like, "Oh, well, we should do that."
No,
something like that.
Yeah, it was, they saw some news article, or no, it was some Craigslist article or something of looking for a roommate, you can live for free, the only thing is you have to dress up like a walrus for about an hour or two a day, because the person had a weird walrus fetish. So it's one of those, you see those creepy Craigslist ads every now and then of yeah, I'll let you stay here for free if you do this weird thing. But they just thought it was so bizarre, so they just started riffing on it on the podcast, and then they were like, this would be a great idea for a movie. And within the episode, from no provocation, they just started creating the entire script of the movie. And in fact, if you listen to, if you stay through the credits of Tusk, they have a clip of it at the end of them describing, it's no, this is what this act should be, and this is the next scene, and it was just, the whole movie came to idea in the span of an hour of just these guys riffing. And it's, if you watch the movie, the plot is pretty scatterbrained.
So basically what David's saying here is, before you listen to that podcast episode, watch the movie. Otherwise, you're going to get a shit ton spoiled for you. So that's basically it.
True story. But it's some of my other favorite shows that have sprung up are the weirdly specific, super specific, like we mentioned last episode, there's a podcast called The Worst Idea of All Time, which is where two guys watch and review Grown Ups 2 every week for a year. And there's a podcast called Star Wars Minute that I love, where each episode is breaking down each minute of Star Wars 1 minute at a time in order.
That's so cool.
Which is nuts, but it's a fantastic, I always call it the best podcast ever, because it's such a weird little show. And the thing is the beginning of podcasts, like, especially, like, if you're first getting into podcasts, the first things you're going to be looking for, like, stuff attached to properties, like, maybe, it's a website's official podcast, like the, Slash Film, the Slash Filmcast, which is the official podcast of slashfilm.com, or maybe it's because you're a fan of, this comedic, and you're a fan of Paul F. Tompkins, so you listen to one of his dozens and dozens of shows. But there's this whole other level of podcasts that I'm getting a really big fan of, which is this, like, weird, underground, unprofessional guys that nobody knows who they are, and nobody knows who they are. They're not the big guys. They're not Scott Aukerman. They don't have, hundreds of thousands of downloads per episode, but they can, like, discuss some, like, their shows can go in really weird and interesting directions. They're generally like 3 hours long, but they're so entertaining because you just feel like you're hanging out with friends. Like there was this podcast I listened to called Press B to Cancel, and I think they stopped doing it like a year or two ago. And it was just guys talking about technology and video games. I only knew about it because one of the guys on the show I went to school with, and they didn't have very many listeners. They were not professionals, but I was so entertained by those guys. If you go listen to Press B to Cancel, it's really fun. Or there is another podcast. I haven't listened to it yet, but a guy last year at the podcast festival told me about it. I think it was called David Loses His Virginity, which only lasted like. It was only like 9 episodes or so, but basically the main guy on the show, the main guy on the podcast was this kid named David. I think he was in high school or something. And it was his friends giving him tips about how to lose his virginity. And then the last episode is he just lost it, and then they talk about his experience, and then they stop doing the show because David was no longer a virgin, so they can't talk about David loses his virginity. But it's like, that's the greatest idea on the planet. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh. I'm kind of upset that they didn't go like for a full 10, I guess maybe that's just the OCD in me, but
well, actually, I know in the, like, when it comes to, like, I heard a professional podcaster say, like, new podcasts generally last 8 episodes. If a podcast can make it past the 8 episode mark, then you really know it's legit and it's around to stay. So these guys made it past the 8 episode mark and then stopped. So
they made the conscious decision to stop. It wasn't like, oh, whatever, we're done. It's like, no, this is the end.
This is it. We don't have anything else we can talk about. This is the end of the show.
I mean, yeah, because even if they were gonna try and continue the show with because what is virginity? Like that could be a virginity of like pretty much anything.
That's true.
So, they could have kept going, but I think it's almost better that they did stop when they. Like with that simple concept.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and that's how you make podcasts nowadays. It's like you can't talk about nothing anymore. You've got to get really specific and really interesting. I know if you've listened to This Is Not a Film, you heard me mention it on there. I had this idea for a show that I almost got off the ground, but it was very difficult to schedule the people that I needed to talk to. That was basically, I had a friend who had never seen Star Wars before, so we were going to podcast his reactions to seeing Star Wars for the first time. And it was just like, and that's a show that would only last 6 episodes, and then it'd be done. But man, it'd be so much fun to do. One of these days, I'm going to nail down that kid's life, and we're going to make it, and it's going to be awesome.
There you go. I mean, because, even if it is like a small podcast just for like a few episodes, it's just a really it's a really interesting perspective that most people won't get to see, and I feel like that's what makes podcasts such a an interesting part of entertainment.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I'm not a big podcast person. I think I've said this on the show plenty of times, and I know I'm going to probably say it later a lot more. But am I against them? By all means, no. I feel like they're the new web series, basically. And if I was against them, I would not be doing one right now. But you know what I mean? Like, and I
secretly
feel like
have this vendetta against podcasts, and you're trying to take it down from the inside.
Yeah, that's dang it. episode 5, and I've already been uncovered.
Shut it down. We didn't make it to episode 8, but we gotta shut it down now.
Yep, we're done. We're over. It's all done. Game over, man. But seriously, I honestly, being a part of this podcast and just kind of entering your world a little bit is actually it's enlightening, because I get to experience these new forms of media, and I start to appreciate them, even though I may not partake in them as much. I definitely can appreciate them and know how much they are worth. And honestly, I think you're right when it comes down to people who haven't really been discovered fully, but have a good following. Those are the people that have the interesting conversations, but just tend to go on a little bit too long. If they were to, crack it down to like an hour, maybe people would listen, or even, a lot more people would listen. But, at that point,
it depends though, because it's a tricky balance of knowing your audience, of knowing like how long you can actually talk about stuff. Like me personally, I consume around probably 15 to 20 hours worth of podcasts every week. And I would love to do more. I need to find a job where I don't have to talk to people, so I can just listen to podcasts all day long. Because, God, I would listen to so many podcasts. It would be wonderful. It would be glorious. Because, like, right now I'm at this point where I'm like, I want to try to, like, keep my finger on the pulse of underground podcasts. Like, underground, I feel like is maybe not the correct term for it, but of these podcasts that are these little guys and are the ones that not everybody's listening to. Or that it doesn't, it's not Serial, it's not The Nerdist, it's not Smodcast, it's not This American Life, that it doesn't have those big name credentials, but are still really, really, really good. And I think that just to segue into that is the cool thing about Andrew Linde, is that like him and Matt Benson and the rest of the guys doing the Benview shows, like they are coming from a place of just love for podcasts, love for their subject, and they don't have any name to their, like they don't have any massive credentials. They're starting to get more and more noticed. They're starting to get a bigger fan base as they expand their network of shows. But the cool thing is these guys have, okay, Andrew Linde, who we're going to talk to, I think alone is a host of 4 or 5 different podcasts, as well as being part of running him and one of his kind of co-founders of the Benview Network, Matt Benson. They have dozens of podcasts on their network that they kind of oversee, that they help produce. And that is a ton of work and a ton of passion. And the cool thing is that they can do just weird, cool, specific stuff. They just started a show called Benview on Spielberg, which is a monthly show that is just every month they talk about another Spielberg movie. And it's wonderful. I would listen to that forever. But yeah, and let's go ahead and just go into it then. Here's Andrew Linde from the Benview Network. So we are here today talking with Andrew Linde, podcast extraordinaire. Andrew, for anybody not familiar with you, tell us who you are, what you do.
Well, I run the Benview Network, and on that I host several shows, including Nerd's Eye View, Shut Up Leonard, and the new Pick Your Path.
Which is a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, it's a choose your own adventure style podcast.
It's a lot of fun too.
Before we start going into some of that though, how did you get involved with podcasting? How did you become a fan of it, and how did you start, like when did you start creating content as well?
Wow. That goes back when I was at a community college. I was in the journalism department there, and I kind of took control of their online broadcasting situation. And from that, I was able to meet up with a lot of people who were doing, online video. Well, it was just audio when I started. I added video after I got there, and then as soon as once I graduated from there, I thought, well, why don't I just keep doing this, but just with audio? And Nerd's Eye View started there.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy that
Well,
I'm still doing it. It's like 4 or 5 years later.
Oh, nice. Yeah, because I was about to say,
Yeah.
like, Nerd's Eye Views on episode 200 something. So you must have been doing that for
And that's not even counting those episodes that I made at Cypress College.
Oh, nice.
That was yeah.
So were you a fan of like podcasts and audio entertainment before that?
I mean, yeah, I don't know why, but at some point when I was still in high school, I was like, yeah, I like listening to NPR. So that's all I listened to in my car. And as we've seen, things like shows like This American Life have spun off into very successful podcasts. And it's just like that style of just someone like talking to you or giving you information in that style, I thought was really great. And once I got an iPod, I was like, oh, let me download some of these podcasts. Let me see what that's all about. And I found, a few that I liked. But as soon as I started making shows myself, I was like, yeah, let me listen to more and more and more and more.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when you had Nerd's Eye View going, how long was it before you started branching out and discussing new topics? Because Nerd's Eye View is like is a very, it's a movie review show and talking about upcoming releases and releases onto DVD and Blu-ray and stuff. But when did you start branching out into other topics, other podcasts as well?
Well, that's what I really like about doing like a weekly show like Nerd's Eye View is that we've always been changing it. Like it's always been slightly if you go year to year, you'll hear differences that are either very small or they can be just huge. We've changed it around a lot. But when I was still at Cypress College, we started a second show where we were just going to talk about video games, and that one didn't last very long, but that was a lot of fun. And that I think that's where you get the bug when you start one podcast. You think, oh, let me start another and another.
And now you have so many. And then somewhere along the way, you got hooked up with Matt Benson, and you guys started the Benview Network and a whole network of stuff.
We met at Cypress College, Matt Benson and I, and he was doing his show there, the Benson's Boombox, and that's where we met, and that's how his show from there grew into its own podcast, the same way that Nerd's Eye View did.
You and Matt Benson are doing that Pick Your Path podcast, right? So, how difficult is it really writing for something like that? Because you're basically what you're doing is you're writing an entire book, and then how long did it take you?
Well, I mean, really, we had the idea for at least a year before we even put out the first episode. But the writing, I think everyone's creative process is different. But for both Matt Benson and I, we like to write under the gun. We like to write when there's a time limit. So as long as we never said, "Oh, we're gonna release it on this day," we could have written forever. So
okay,
it just took as long as we thought. But yeah, we really did. It's really like a full length, choose your own adventure book, but instead in an audio format. So that was the big challenge of how do you write a story that goes as many different ways as you need it to go.
So you guys had to establish this is where a release date is, and how much did you even have written before you had established okay, we are officially doing this, we are pressing the launch button on this? How prepared were you before that decision was made?
I don't know how much the other two, Matt Benson or David King, had written, but I had about a third of my first story written, because we decided we were going to do this in seasons, and so the first season would have 6 stories, 6 episodes, and there was 3 of us writing, so we each only had to write 2 episodes.
That seems fair. That's cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right on. And this is it's a monthly series. The first one is the Don't Blow Up the Universe. Is that what it was called? And then the second one, you're an agent of Crash.
Agent of Crash.
And you guys are planning on sticking with the whole choose your own adventure format of these high concept ideas for most of the stories.
Yeah, we definitely like where we came from with this was a place of love for these old choose your own adventure books. And so many of our like the core ideas that we had came from what kind of zany adventures would you get up to in one of these books, or what kind of especially in Don't Blow Up the Universe, I think Benson really nailed it with how many twists and turns and how far off from the initial premise that a story can get. One of his endings involves actually turning into a shark. That's if you find it, that's great. And if you'll recall, there was a choose your own adventure book called You Are a Shark.
Oh, really?
It's all ties back into that we really enjoyed those old books and how crazy they would get.
Well, I will say this, like, one thing that you guys nailed that the books could only dream of is nailing that ambience, like the ambience, like the
tone and stuff,
tone, like the music and the foley and all that, and really just because all I had to do is just put my headphones on and just close my eyes and really just imagine I was there, and it was fantastic.
Well, thank you.
No, definitely, yeah. You guys really nailed that.
Well, and I know that I guess this is kind of going backwards a little bit in your story, but I know a large part of the Pick Your Path is David King, and he did the Midnight Marinara stuff. How much involvement into that project were you? Was it more of just hey, I'm helping you out and giving you a platform? Have you been directly involved in the production of that?
Well, here's the other funny thing. So I also met David King at Cypress College. Cypress College, my community college, changed my entire life without me even realizing it. It's go to college, kids. It's worth it. But yeah, I met him in a screenwriting class while I was there, and we knew each other, just from that. And one day on Facebook, I see he posted, he's like, "Hey, I'm starting a new podcast. Here's the pilot episode." And I listened to it, and I was like, "This is really good. This is really something that I hadn't heard of, and that I think is really going to grow." And I know that he's dedicated. He had, in that screenwriting class, he wrote an entire script for a pirate movie that I hope to one day see on the screen or read at some point. I should ask him if I could just read the script. But he put out that episode, and I contacted him, and then after that he said, "Yeah, I'll come on," and he's been a part of the Benview Network from that moment. And as far as what I do, he runs all that all by himself. I've offered to loan him, equipment if he ever is in a dire need of it. But he finds his own voice actors. He edits all of that all by himself. I've been a voice on a couple of the stories that he does on Midnight Marinara, and that's a lot of fun. So yeah.
Awesome. Now the whole audio drama thing, is that something you ever thought about getting into, of creating this original scripted content that you're now doing? Is that something you've always wanted to do as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really good place where podcasts are going, where they're making like season length content, where it's we're going to put out 10 episodes and this is going to tell a complete story.
Yeah.
And I think that's why that was another part of what really attracted me to actually making Pick Your Path a reality, was that I could write a story and it would get made and people could listen to it. And it's it's only one episode, but the way that we've written together, Benson and David King and I, you'll notice certain things pop up again and again in our stories where it's like a connected universe. It's like a shared ideas.
Oh, that's cool. I hadn't noticed that about the episodes yet, but that's really awesome that they connect together in little ways. I'm gonna have to listen through more. I only listened through a couple paths of each one. Now I feel like I've got to be a completionist and just listen to every chapter,
every ending.
every possibility. Well, and that's especially like, I mean, with like things like Thrilling Adventure Hour, which is now unfortunately leaving, like there's a gap, there's an opening for you guys for audio dramas to come in. And it's such a cool idea, and I hope it gets a lot of recognition. What's some of your like favorite parts of doing that so far? Like what has been one of your favorite things about the story you've written, or about just the whole experience of doing it?
Well, definitely my first story was a spy story, which I love spy movies, and I love James Bond is really great, even though a lot of the movies are like, corny or weird. I think they hit all of the tropes of being a spy in such a way that is really fun, and that's what I wanted to put into that first story. You Are an Agent of Crash. And that led to a lot of fun ideas where it's like, oh, in this ending you died because, I mean, you're not as good as James Bond. You've just done something really dumb, and that's going to cause like a kind of a fun ending.
Oh, I was just going to say, it almost like listening through it makes me feel like James Bond got lucky more than was smart, because like it's just like, oh, I don't know which one of these is the better options, whether to hide in the closet or under the desk, but clearly one of them is going to go great and one of them is not.
And sometimes you get wrapped up in a location that is literally a dead end no matter what choice you make. Don't go to the beach house. Just don't go to the beach house.
No,
you're very upset
that was
about
another
that.
thing about writing a story like this was that I didn't want to have like too many bad endings. I didn't want to have it where that you would get trapped in a place where you couldn't get out unless you made like all the stupid choices. So if you do go to the beach house, there is one way that you can make it out and get a good ending.
Okay. So basically what you're saying is
You've got to go back and listen through every option until you find it, so you know that your quest to the beach house wasn't in vain.
Yes, I will redeem myself. Thank you. I will go back to that damn beach house, and I will redeem it.
So, one thing I want to talk, just another show you guys do that I'm a big fan of, is mostly because I'm a big fan of Community, is Shut Up Leonard. And, like, I don't know. I don't even have any specific question about it. I just want to talk about it because I love it.
I mean, it's a podcast about community.
Yeah.
I mean, David and I both are huge fans, and of course you are too, because you obviously created one. But, one of the things with that is like going back and talking about past seasons, TV show, like episodes that have aired for a while, because a lot of TV show podcasts are about like episodes that are being released in the moment. And while you guys, did do that with seasons 4, 5, and 6, like, were you able to find that people still listen to the episodes of past seasons? Was there still an audience for it, or was it basically just filling time between seasons?
No, people do listen. I mean, the podcast numbers are always hard to nail down the exact number of downloads. But we've been on Twitter, and we get people that come up on Twitter and they say like, oh wow, I'm really glad that I can listen to this, or oh, it's really or people that are catching up now, people that have just found out about us, and during the 6th season they were saying, oh wow, I'm listening to everything in order. I'm starting back in season 1. Even though we recorded everything out of order.
Yeah.
But I think it'll all turn out okay.
Well, I'm not going to pretend that that I listened to the podcast. David recently just turned me on to it. Have you guys been acknowledged by like Dan Harmon or anybody from Community? Like, have they reached out to you?
No, and we can't blame them. They're all busy people. But we, my co-host Matt Benson and I, we had gone to Harmontown a couple of times. Harmontown is a weekly show that Dan Harmon puts on in LA, and he puts that out as a podcast as well. And we've gone to the live, show of that, and a couple of times we'd had the chance to, go up to him and say hi. We're the guys that do that podcast. But now we've been slowly adding to, at the beginning of each episode of the podcast, there's a little snippet of someone who was involved in the show saying "Shut Up Leonard," which is a lot of fun. And the first one of those that we got was Dan Harmon. So that was really fun.
And then you've been slowly adding to it. Like I heard that you got Officer Krakowski on there.
Yeah.
Which is great. Now, with like doing podcasts and stuff, like as you're growing your network of stuff, how has it been finding an audience? Podcast is still such a new thing that there's not as many listeners out there. How's it been like finding your audience, finding what people like, and kind of keeping all these shows going?
Well, a lot of people that tell you with podcasts, oh, just keep making the content, don't worry about the audience. But I mean, your question is, very valid. It's like, how do you find someone who wants to listen to what you're making? Mm-hmm. And I found like a little success in there's a Reddit. Mm-hmm. Reddit's a website, and there's a subreddit for community, and so I posted a Shut Up Leonard link in there, and there's the usual like, boo, get out, and then just some people are like, oh yeah, and so we saw a huge spike just from that, just from putting one link in one place and saying like, hey, if you like community, maybe you'll like us. So that's kind of the trick, is finding the little groups on the internet that already exist that just kind of want more. Because as we're all fans of something, and you always want to either talk to someone or hear someone talk about something that you enjoy, and so I think that as podcast listeners, we're always looking for that next thing.
Yeah, and it's about finding your niche, finding the market that's already there, and being like, hey, here's more of that thing you love.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who's trying to start a podcast? Because, I mean, maybe someone who's talking to you is trying to get it up and running. David, take notes. We're taking notes, David.
Yeah, I think the real trick of starting a new podcast is, like, you want to, like we were just talking about, you want to find that niche. You want to find a group. You want to find some kind of show that you can do that maybe no one else can do. Like you've got your own perspective on something. You've got your own love of a show. You've got your own love of a topic, and so you want to make sure there's something that you're actually like passionate about, and something that isn't as talked about in other shows. Like there's so many podcasts that are kind of aimless, I want to say.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to throw shade at any, show in particular, but there's a lot of podcasts that are just,
well, it works for some,
a couple of guys just talking about whatever they like, and it's very non-specific. You never know what you're going to get. You're going to have to, the only reason why you'd listen to that show is if you like the hosts, which hopefully you always like the hosts of the show that you're listening to, but it's hard to get in new listeners if all that you're offering is like, here's what's on my brain today. Yeah. Like that's kind of, I think that's more of an old model that comes from like, some kind of talk radio where it's like, oh, I'll just turn on the radio and whatever's happening, I guess I got to listen to. We don't have that anymore. We have choices that we make all the time. And if, one podcast host says one thing we don't like, and we can just go, yeah, I'm not going to listen to this anymore. And that's done.
Yeah, you have to be specific and direct.
But the other thing, I mean, and then I always feel like kind of weird about this, because Nerd's Eye View is a show that's just about, new movies. And that's a lot of podcasts. I mean, that's so many shows, and so many other shows have like connections where they can, interview the actors or, talk to directors or up and coming actors and directors. And I don't really have that with Nerd's Eye View. I just have a perspective of, this is me and the people that I know, and we love movies and we love to talk about movies. And we're not part of, like, I guess you'd call it like mainstream criticism. We're not part of that, whatever you want to call it, that happens on, TV and regular broadcast. We're just giving what we think about the film and how we think it connects to, films as a whole, as an industry.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's about like, cause like I really feel like that whole, I always compare it to the Smodcast like way of doing things, where it's just two guys bullshitting for 2 hours. Yeah. And like I feel like that style is kind of fading away. There is like shows and that's one of the things that I really like about the Benview Network in general. Like, I just started listening to Benview on Spielberg, which is a super, super specific topic.
Yes.
And it's, but it's great.
Yeah, I think that's more what people want when they go, like, there's a discoverability problem with podcasts where when you want to find something new about something you like, I mean, you can Google it, but then that doesn't really talk about whether or not that's a quality show. You kind of want a recommendation in a way. And iTunes, you're just going to get, here's our top shows, and who knows how that system works. That's like, it's a combination of newness plus, downloads plus, the editor of the iTunes says, hey, I want that show to be number one. So it's really hard to find like a good show that you really want to listen to. Like, I love Gilmore Girls, the TV show Gilmore Girls. And I did not find the podcast Gilmore Guys, which is now like super huge, until there was an article written about it, and it got shared, and I saw it on Facebook, and I went, holy crap, there's a podcast about a thing that I love. And I'd thought about starting a podcast about Gilmore Girls because I love that show so much. But I waited too long, and then all of a sudden, there's this other show, and they're great. I really enjoy listening to them, and they're covering all 7 seasons. And from their coverage, they've also gotten to interview people involved in the show. And I'm like, that's how it should be with podcasts. You find a topic that people aren't really covering, and then you'll get noticed. And it took them like a couple of months to get an article written about them, and then that's how I found them. That's what we're all hoping for, is that you put in the good work, you make a good show, and eventually someone will go, hey, that's a good show, and then you'll get noticed.
Yeah. Well, it's the same way. Like, I mean, I discovered my now favorite podcast the same way with Star Wars Minute, that it was just only reason that they got noticed is because Doug Benson talked about them once, and now they've got a huge following, or like it does seem like it's all about getting that like little lucky break of just like, somebody just please talk about me once, and then all of a sudden everybody will know about me.
Yep, that's podcasts.
It almost, I mean, because I'm not a huge podcast person. Like, that's always been David. But I almost would want to compare it to web series in a way, or at least how web series are now, where there's so many.
Yeah.
And you almost have to be recommended. I completely agree. Like,
yeah.
The quality is up in the air at this point.
Now, is chasing an audience something that like has been really important to you? Do you find yourself like making decisions about what to talk about, what not to talk about, what show to make, what to spend your time on based off of what you think will get audience attention, or is that something that you've basically had to kind of like put out of your mind to be able to do this?
I mean, yeah, you really have to like not think about that once you're in the show. You have to, like, whatever show you're going to start, you have to go into it with whatever frame of mind that you're going to make the show in, whatever kind of moral stance or however you're going to approach the show. That's your approach.
Yeah.
And once you're making it, you can't start switching around going, oh, they don't like it when I talk about this, I'm never going to talk about that again. If that's something that you want to talk about, that's just, you have to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I think when you're making a show, you can definitely look at what's out there, and you can look at what's already being served and what's already, not being made. And I think that, I mean, that's what led us to make Pick Your Path. That's really, we looked and we saw, hey, there are like no podcasts that make use of this ability to put chapters in, to make choices like this.
Yeah.
Like, let's do it.
Which is an aspect of podcasting I completely forgot about. I remember when when that enhanced podcast became a thing, and like there was like 2 podcasts that I listened to that started doing it and then stopped doing it. But I think it took a while for somebody to find like how to properly use that function.
Yeah, and it's really weird. I don't actually do any of the editing on it. That's all Matt Benson, and he does the editing on a Mac because I don't think there is a way to make an enhanced podcast on a PC, or if there is, it like costs a lot of money. I can't remember. I remember searching for it and finding something that could have worked, but he ended up just doing it on the
GarageBand
on his Mac, because on GarageBand, yeah,
yeah,
it was just easier.
because it's the only one that has that functionality integrated. And is that something that, like, I imagine it, because, like, I originally just downloaded on my whatever podcast player on my phone and then quickly realized that it wasn't going to work like that. Like, is that something that has been difficult of finding, like, platforms for people to be able to actually listen to the show the way it's meant to be listened to?
Yeah, so the enhanced podcasts, they really work best with, like, Apple devices, like all the generic podcast apps, and I even think just regular podcast apps on, like, an iPhone work with enhanced podcasts. You can skip to different chapters. But the only thing that I found that works with that on something like an Android phone is this thing called a VLC player, where you'd have to download the file and then listen through that. Which that's a little inconvenient. So what we do in between the brand new episodes where you get to make your choices is we've been releasing an episode where it's just like what we consider the main path. So you don't even have to make choices in these, like, half episodes. You can just put it on and just listen to an entire story being told. I mean, you lose your your ability to make choices. You lose a lot of the fun color that comes from the different endings and different choices. But you get a complete story. I think that's why we've been releasing, in between episodes, we release, like, a full path.
So, if you're okay with kind of talking about what's to come, like, what are some of the storylines you have coming up that you're really excited about?
Well, I mean, when David King and Matt Benson and I got together initially, and we decided on 6, we each picked our 2 stories, and so far only 2, right, have come out. Yeah. So the third one, I believe I already said the title in our official. So this isn't news. The third one's called what is it? It's like theme park Paragon theme. Yeah, something like that. It's David's story.
Okay.
He's been working really hard on it, and basically the premise of that one is that you inherit a theme park, and you have to, in order to collect the inheritance connected to it, you have to run it.
So you're playing Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Yes, it's very heavily inspired by Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, that's David's first story.
And actually, by the time this episode is released, which is going to be like a week or so from now, that episode will probably be out. That's coming at that because your episodes come out at the beginning of every month.
Yeah, it'll be out July 1st.
Okay, yeah. So by the time this episode drops, that episode will be out.
Nice. Yeah, that's really fun. He had a lot of big ideas in that. It's been really fun to see it kind of grow and change, and also I feel like his writing style for his first story is so different from even I feel like all of our writing styles are so different. So it'll be a lot of fun to see it. Like it's more descriptive. Each of the paths, they might be a little shorter, but they spend a lot more time in telling you what's going on and the ramifications of every choice that you make. So I think that's a lot of fun.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear that. So with what you're doing with podcasting, like, into the future, what are some of your, like, short-term goals? Where do you see yourself going, but also, like, where would you like to go? Short-term, long-term, where would you like to go with the podcast network?
Well, of course I want to keep it growing. I'd love to find some more, niche podcasts that fill out areas where, people want to listen to something, but they don't have it yet. So I've been always trying to find that. And I'd love to get, I've been trying to introduce, like, ads. Like, I've been trying to find sponsors and different advertisers who would want to advertise on our podcast. I mean, we're not as big as, like, Serial, but people listen.
Yeah, but
so
you're big enough. You've got a listenership, and you've got people who respect your opinion.
Yeah. So and that's been, I read all these articles about podcasting, and a lot of them talk about, like, podcast advertising. It's the next big thing because in an advertisement in a podcast, it's generally the host talking directly to the listener. And that kind of advertising is so direct. It's something that people don't tune out. And I think in a lot of podcasts, they make it fun. Like if you guys listen to My Brother and Me, I kind of love it when they call it the money zone. They go to the money zone and then they do the advertising, but they're still like goofing around. They're still making jokes. So it's still a fun part to listen to, even though it's an advertisement.
Yeah.
Oh, but for the, the future of like the Benview Network, I'd love for us to be, as big as, the other big networks. I'd love it to be like when people list off, oh yeah, I listen to shows on Nerdist and Benview. Like that would be great. It's just a matter of finding the right shows that people want to listen to, helping them out as much as you can, and seeing if people like them,
Yeah. And is this something you plan on making a career out of, or even if and if so, is it something that you ever, when you even started doing this, thought that maybe this could be a career?
That's really something that would be great if I could turn this into a career. But even a lot of the great podcasters, I think, are still doing this in addition to something else. But I this did help me find an interest in radio journalism, and but I've done some written work too for different places. And so I think, between this and writing online, I think that's how I see my future. But I'd love, just to be able to say oh yeah, I made the Benview Network, and that's something that people really like and enjoy the podcasts of, and it's something that people will go oh wow, that's really cool, and just keep making more podcasts. Because eventually we're going to run out of episodes of Community for Shut Up Leonard, and we've already talked about what we're going to do next, and I'm really excited for that.
Do Rick and Morty. Just keep it in the Dan Harmon camp.
Yeah, I asked Matt Benson, and he didn't seem to be in love with that idea. But we both love Rick and Morty, but I think he's ready for something new, and I think I am too. He's on more podcasts than me. My God.
Well, on with every interview that we have, we like to ask you if you've seen any interesting video or anything weird on the internet.
We do a lot of discussion about YouTube stuff and weird videos, so we like to end the interviews with YouTube pick of the week. So,
boy. I listen to podcasts. I don't really watch YouTube videos.
Well, then what about a podcast pick?
Yeah, there you go. This is all about podcasts.
Oh, boy. Sure. This isn't a small podcast by any means, but I don't know if a lot of people know about it. It's called Roderick on the Line. And it's a weekly conversation between Merlin Mann, who was previously some kind of online tech guru, but he really hates being called that now. He likes, being a podcaster. And his friend and musician, John Roderick, who played with, or I think he is the Long Winters. That's his band. And they're just like two guys talking about whatever they like. But I think they're very funny, and they both have a very specific viewpoint that is very fun to come back to every week and kind of catch up with them and what's going on in their brains.
Awesome. I'm going to have to check that out. So just as we're closing off, where can people find what you have going on? Where can people follow you, listen to your shows?
Well, my personal Twitter is at Podcaster Andrew. And you can find all of the Benview Network shows at benviewnetwork.com. Pick Your Path, you can find it benviewnetwork.com/PYP. I think it's a really great show. I think everyone should check it out. My other shows, Nerd's Eye View. Every week I talk about, with some friends, we talk about a new movie that's in theaters and what's going on in the movie world. That's nevpodcast.com. Shut Up Leonard. Every week, Matt Benson and I talk about the TV show Community, which stopped being a TV show and started being a Yahoo show, and that was exciting. But we're now on the 3rd season, and that's at shutupleonard.com. And you can find just all kinds of good stuff at benviewnetwork.com.
All right, benviewnetwork.com. Thank you so much for your time, Andrew. It was great talking to you. And hope to see you again soon. Hope to see you at the podcast festival again.
Yeah, that was a good time.
Oh, that was great. For anybody who's never heard of the podcast festival, it is a blast. You go and listen to podcasts, and it's great. All right. Thank you so much, Andrew. Have a good one.
You too.
All right. All right. Thank you, Andrew Linde. That was
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. So before we
He was really cool.
Yeah, no, he's awesome. And that guy, he's a hard worker and he's a really cool dude. And definitely listen to Pick Your Path. It's wonderful.
I'm going to find the good ending to that. It's going to happen. The beach house is going to be conquered. All right, here we go.
F you, beach house.
Beach house.
All right, that's
okay,
going to be
ahead.
all right. Yeah, that's how we're going to end every episode from now on. It's just F you, beach house. All right.
All right.
So before we close this off officially, though, let's go ahead and I know we do our YouTube pick of the week now. Our guest did a podcast pick of the week, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with mine and keep it in theme. It is on YouTube, but it is a clip from a podcast. And this is actually something I saw at a panel about podcast advertising and how to be a good podcast advertiser. And this guy, the guy doing this, who's actually from Squarespace, he's their like official liaison to podcasters. He played this clip. And look up Bill Burr, Sherry's Berries. And it's only like 3 minutes long. Just watch it. And basically, just to give you what it is Bill Burr has his the Monday Morning Podcast, and he was supposed to do this ad read for a company called Sherry's Berries, and about halfway through, he's just like, this is ridiculous, what am I doing right now? And it's hilarious. And this clip was actually used by this guy running the panel as an example of great advertising on a podcast, because they're like, because this is what like podcasters actually, what they actually really enjoy. And Sherry's Berries saw a huge spike in sales after this and kept Bill Burr as like an official, like they kept sponsoring him for a while because they were like,
no way.
Because it's like, I was listening to a podcast today, How Did This Get Made, which is with Paul Scheer, Jason Mantzoukas, and June Diane Raphael, where they talk about awful movies. And anyways, they were doing a sponsor read, and he was talking about, I think it's the company's Blue Apron. There's free advertising for them. Where like it's for making like gourmet meals. They'll send you ingredients so you can make them. And he was just like, yeah, and then you can. And in the middle of the ad read, Paul Scheer is just obviously just riffing, and he's just like, yeah, and you can impress your lady friend or your man friend. I mean, we're talking some serious P and V here. No, in no other medium can you say P and V as a ad read and get away with it.
Oh, of course not. But
it's wonderful. Great. It's wonderful. But yeah, go watch the Sherry's Berries thing. It's pretty hilarious.
So basically what David's saying is that if you have a product and you pay us money to plug it, we'll say anything you want us to say.
And we'll and if it's ridiculous, we'll laugh all the way through.
There you go. All right, so that's your pick?
Yeah, well, just the funny thing about, like, that, like, Bill Burr is even, like, there's a part in there is like, well, the Post wants me to spell out berries, so it's Berries, in case you didn't know how to spell berries. And he's just pointing out the ridiculousness in the ad read, but it's I don't know, it's that kind of meta humor that the internet really loves.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you got for me, Michael?
All right. Well, mine is, I guess, sort of in tandem with podcasts. It was from a Monday morning radio prank show called Z Morning Zoo. It's basically, if you type in WWE John Cena prank call, you're gonna find it. I'd recommend going with a longer version of it, unless you want to just jump right into it. But if you like an 8-minute long video, because it kind of preps you for what's going to happen. But basically, the video revolves around this prank show that gets requests to have, like, you know, them prank people. And this one time specifically, the husband of this wife ended up getting into an argument with her about wrestling. And, like, he was just watching wrestling, and she comes home, and she's like, no, I want to watch my soap operas or something. And so she basically, instead of just letting him watch the show, because it was pay-per-view, so he had to watch it. Otherwise, you know, he would lose out on, like, $50. So instead of just letting him do his thing, she just sat there and, like, yelled at him the entire time so he couldn't actually watch the show. And so then he's like, you know what, you guys, just prank her. Just go with it. And they lay into her, like, ridiculously, like, with just relentless phone calls. And it's not in a horrible way. Like, I'm almost making it seem like a bad thing, but it's really funny. Like, in the beginning, it's just like, hey, you want to get pay-per-view? And she's like, no, thank you. She's very polite. And then as every phone call goes on, she just gets that much more angry.
Because they keep calling her with more and more, like, ridiculous ways of...
Yeah, they get really creative. Like, they ended, I mean, actually, you know what? No, I don't even want to ruin some of these jokes because it's so clever. So, but eventually she snaps and it's hysterical. And then finally, like, you know, then they let her know, like, oh, it's a prank show. And she's like, oh my God. And it's, you know, that nice little resolution and everybody's laughing and nobody's hurt. But, you know, it's that whole journey that just makes it hilarious. So WWE John Cena prank call. And also now whenever you listen to it, you're going to want that John Cena theme song to be your, like, ringtone. Because it's super catchy. But yeah, so that's mine.
Nice. All right. Well, Michael, if people like you and want to find more of you, where can they do that?
Well, David, you guys can find me on Twitter at Arctic_Ginger. You can find me on Instagram as at Michael William Hunter. You can also find me on Facebook as Michael William Hunter. Just type that in. And on IMDb under the same name because, you know, that's my name. What about you, David? Where can I tweet you and annoy you with the social media buzz?
Well, you can only find me on Twitter because I don't really like doing any other social media stuff, and I barely even like doing Twitter. But you can find me at David W. Spencer. If it's in your fancy to read like one tweet a month. This is my social network. You know what? If you want to hear more of me, listen to Thank You Internet. But
there you go. And send us emails.
Yes, you can find the show. You can find us on Twitter. What was that Twitter handle again, Michael?
That was TY Internet Pod.
All right.
So at TY Internet Pod.
And you can also email us at thanksinternetpodcast. The first email we get, we will read on the air. I just checked. It does not say we have any email. Well, it says we have 3 messages, but it's not showing them to me. So maybe you did email us, and I just haven't talked about it yet. So if you have, I apologize. But if not...
That's at Gmail, by the way.
Yeah, it's at
just
Gmail.
So anybody...
That's
Yeah.
What else would it be?
You didn't specify.
Does somebody
touche,
seriously use
touche.
Yahoo Mail? Like, does somebody use Yahoo? Okay, you know what? We will read the first email we receive unless it's from Yahoo Mail. In which case, I'm sorry,
We will literally make fun of you just because you're from Yahoo Mail.
I'm just
and
kidding.
then
I have
we'll
nothing
move on.
against Yahoo Mail, but I just don't understand why anybody doesn't. It doesn't. You know what? It's not matter. Why am I dragging my hatred for other email platforms?
you know
It's a
what?
stupid
You know
thing
what?
to even be passionate about.
Well, you're okay. That's true, but I will say, that Google is kind of like the universal email now, because you can connect all of your different emails to that.
Yes.
So, so even if someone does have a Yahoo, if they still connect it to a Google account for their business or something, then that's fine. Because either way, somewhere along the line, Google is going to have to be dragged into your life. Even if someone's trying to send you a file anymore, you have to have Google, for Google Drive and stuff like that. You have to have it. But that's a topic for another day.
You know what? It's not important.
David.
Why am I talking about this? The important thing is that you can email us at thanksinternetpodcast@gmail.com. 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 I'm repeating this so you can remember, but also so I can remember, so I don't have to pause in the future to try to look up our email address.
Bueller.
One more
Bueller.
place you can find me, actually, is I just got my tickets to the LA Podfest, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a yearly podcast festival. It happens September, I think it's 18th through 20th this year in LA. It's a pretty awesome experience. See live podcasts, connect with other podcasters. It's a great place to find some of those underground podcasters, as I was saying. That's where I met Andrew Linde. And if you are there and you see me there and you say, hey, I've listened to Thanks Internet, this goes for anybody, even if Michael shows up and tells me this, I will buy you a drink. If you say you listen to Thanks Internet,
All right.
I will buy you a drink.
So did you get me a ticket?
I did not buy you a ticket. Are you kidding me? You got to pay for that yourself.
Aww.
Jury's still out on whether or not Michael Hunter will be there. But if we get a million listeners between now and then, and you all give us a bunch of money, Michael will be there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Let's aim for that.
Yeah. And then, but if that does happen, I have a feeling I'm gonna have to buy a lot of drinks for people if we get a million listeners between now and then.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think there's even a million people on the planet who knows what a podcast is, so I'm not super worried about this outcome.
Okay.
That's everything, right? Get everything?
Yeah, I think so. I got my keys. I have my wallet.
All right.
I'm pretty sure I think both suitcases are 50 pounds, so I think we're fine.
All right. Do you have any weird requests you want to make to the internet? Last week it was Psyduck dubstep. What? Did you say anything you want the internet to do for you today?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. Let me think about that. That's actually a good idea.
You know what? I have a request. Here's my request to the internet.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, go ahead.
Stop using Yahoo Mail.
Oh, come on. You can't you can't expect everybody to just be
Nope.
oh, well,
Stop
hold
it,
on,
internet.
David W. Spencer. He said we gotta stop using the Yahoo.
and that's also making that okay, and I take that back. So anyone who, now it just sounds like all Yahoo users are Canadian or something, and that's not true.
What do you have against Canadians? I think Canadians are a lot better than to use Yahoo Mail.
I you know what?
It's
Canucks
such a
are
stupid
fine in my
thing to be
book.
passionate about, but for some reason I am. It's just email. It's all the same, but why do I care if people use Gmail as opposed to anything else? I don't know. We really need to stop recording this, though, because I'm starting to go a little crazy here.
You're okay. So fine. You know what? Next time I'm gonna come up with a really awesome request for the internet.
Yeah.
And hopefully sometime it's like a time capsule for somewhere down the line.
Because
when we get
5
a lot
years
of
from now it will have
fans.
happened. 5 years from now we'll have Psyduck Step. That's what it was called.
Yeah, side duck step. Yeah.
Psyduck Step, and there will be no more Yahoo Mail, and whatever weird request we have next week.
There you go. We got this.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Yep. Take care and thank you, internet.
And thank you, Internet.
Okay.
All right.
That was quite the random rant there.
I know.
But- It's
You know
like
what?
Emails, though. God.
It was really fun to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, honestly, that could be a whole topic for
I
itself.
know it could
you know
be.
What I mean?
It could be, but it is such a stupid. I don't know why. Like, legitimately, if I see somebody has an email address of anything other than Gmail or like their own personal website, a part of me dies a little, and I don't know why. There's no reason for me to care about that because it's literally all the same. I don't. It's a problem. I have a problem with email judging.
Yeah.
I'm an email racist.